Cari Champion, and welcome to The Arena, presented by Tractor Supply Company. Isaiah Thomas, Renee Montgomery, and Atlanta Hawks head coach Lloyd Pierce will join me shortly. But first, we begin with the value of a name. There's an old sports cliche that suggests the name on the front of your jersey is a little more important than the name on the back, meaning it's about the team and not the individual player. But for the very first time, the text on the back of the jersey is more important than a logo on the front. Bleacher Report's senior NBA writer Howard Beck takes a deeper look at the meaning behind these words.
Have you been paying attention this postseason? I mean, really paying attention.
We've not seen this ever in the history of the NBA.
The sights, the sounds.
My legacy is going to be based on how much I give back to my people. We found something worth fighting for.
The strangeness.
Our focus today cannot be on basketball.
And the slogans. Maybe you stopped reading them. Take another look. Most were statements, others a plea. Listen to us, hear us, respect us. Only a handful of players chose those messages, but they might have been the most important of all because they were aimed at a specific audience, me and you and those who look like us. A plea to white America. Listen, hear, respect. It's not just about George Floyd or Breonna Taylor or Jacob Blake. It's not just about police brutality. It's about the systemic racism that permeates our society, the insidious ways it manifests in everyday life. But we don't see it, you and I. It doesn't directly impact us. We've been willfully blind, moving about our lives as if we live in the thoroughly fair and just world we so badly want to believe in. But there are two Americas, the one you and I live in, and the parallel version that Black Americans experience daily. Maybe you don't want to believe it. Maybe it's too disturbing to accept. Or maybe you've dismissed it as some abstract political talking point. But realize this, it's easy to dismiss precisely because it doesn't directly impact you or me. That's why it's our duty, our moral obligation to listen to our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, and to the NBA players who are today pleading with us to understand their experience.
We thought we could make more of a statement staying here and playing together. Our voice would be much bigger and heard.
Listen to Bradley Beal recall the threats he received from a traffic cop.
He comes up to me and says, "What if I up your Monday and put you on a headline?" How am I supposed to respond to that?
Here's Sterling Brown, who was tackled by 6 officers and tased over a parking violation.
I get mad every time I watch it.
Hear the anguish in Doc Rivers' voice when he talks about Jacob Blake.
If you watch that video, you don't need to be black to be outraged.
And he's right. Listen to all the white NBA coaches who have spoken out on racism and police brutality.
Racism, systemic oppression, they don't just go away.
We're pushing for a more equal, more just United States.
It's not just about a return to play, it's also about making sure we keep the conversation in our backyard.
They're not doing it to be politically correct. They're speaking up because every day they hear the stories of abuse and discrimination from their players. It's not about being woke or a social justice warrior. It's not about left or right, liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican. This isn't about partisanship. It's just about being human. If you're watching this, you love the NBA. You root for these guys, brag about your favorite players, wear their jerseys, but it's not enough. If you truly love these players, you need to respect them as people. Understand that their life experiences aren't like yours and mine. Black Americans are hurting in a way that white Americans cannot grasp, but we can listen to them. We can hear them, we can respect them, and we can act.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Arena, presented by Tractor Supply Company. So on this platform for the next hour, we will discuss today's social issues that live in and around the world of sports. NBA champion Isaiah Thomas, WNBA champion Renee Montgomery, and of course, our guy, the coach, Atlanta head coach, Hawks head coach. We got you here, Lloyd. Thank you so much for joining us. I think that I'm going to start with you, Zeke, because we were in a morning meeting, and I know that you had something profound to share regarding that story that we just saw by NBA senior writer Howard Beck.
Yeah, too many times we see each other as players in uniform, and that's how we viewed. But outside of the jersey, we're citizens also. And I remember, growing up on the west side of Chicago, 8 years old, the first time I had a weapon pointed at me was by the United States government. Military tank pulled up off Homan, took a right turn on Congress. I lived 3340 West Congress. I'll never forget it. And the tank pulled around and pointed it right at me. Second time I had a weapon pulled on me was by a Chicago police officer on the west side of Chicago. Now, when I'm the coach of the Indiana Pacers, we're coming back from a road trip, 3 a.m. in the morning from the West Coast, and I get pulled over. Not only am I pulled over, but I'm handcuffed, put in the back seat. They bring the dogs out. The dogs sniff all in my car looking for drugs. And this just goes to show you again what we face as citizens outside of the jersey, outside of being popular, outside of being celebrity. So when we say, hear us, we're not just talking about ourselves, but we're also talking about us outside of uniform and then what our family members and friends go through on a daily basis. That's every day.
In those 3 incidents that you talk about, what did you feel in those moments?
I'm scared to death, especially as a little child. Again, 3340 West Congress, I'll never forget my address. And it was during the riots. And again, you think you're getting ready to die because you've seen what has happened in your community with your family and your friends. My brother had his 2 front teeth knocked out by a police officer. And so all of these things happen daily within our community. And that's just what we live with. But when you see us all in uniform, we don't necessarily bring that to the arena. But when we take the jersey off and walk outside, then we're in this skin, and this is how we're getting treated in this system, regardless of who you are.
First time the name on the back of the jersey means more than the logo. Renee, what were your thoughts?
My thoughts were the listen, hear, respect. Like those words, some of those are action items, and people are like, what can I do? You can listen. Everyone can listen. You can hear what people have to say. And then when you hear it, you can't just judge it. You can respect it. And so coming from a white man in America, almost, it's a pointed plea. He said he knows the space they're in, and he knows that their reality isn't our reality. So for me, it's a welcome sight because I think that's how things change. If we can say all we want, you and your brother can say all we want. I understand. If he tells me, I'm like, I know somebody too that happened to, but it has to be white America that understands this is the difference. We all know somebody who's been a victim of police brutality. Coach?
Yeah, I was born in the 70s, and as a child, you grow up thinking about the civil rights movement and everything that occurred, and you say, wow, how would I have reacted in those situations, marching, protesting, being beaten, fighting for the civil and human rights of others. But 2020 is our civil rights movement. This is our time and opportunity to really stand up to all of the injustices that we see in this world. And when you watch a film like that from Howard Beck, he's from San Jose, where I'm from, and we grew up in both cultural, very diverse areas. To know that in 2020, you're still seeing both white America and black America discuss the newness of discrimination and the call for our players, who, as Isaiah talked about, when we say we're speaking up and they're using our platform and the coaches are doing the same thing, we take the criticism of what we're speaking up against as if because we're in a privileged position, because we're our players are rich, our players are wealthy. They don't understand that we have family members, we have friends, we have communities where we come from that we're really speaking up against and speaking up for, because that's what's not being seen, and those are the people that don't have the voices that we do, and it's our obligation. So, I just look at it and I say it's still shocking that the thing that I grew up learning about and wondering how would I react, well, this is that moment.
Yeah, well, you say the newness of this conversation. You talk about how hearing a white man say this is important, pay attention because we know. This will be good for our next guest as we transition. Jane Elliot is considered the leading educator when it comes to understanding diversity. She became nationally and internationally known for her anti-racism experiment, which she called Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes exercise. It was a sobering account of racism and prejudice in America. For more than 50 years, Jane Elliot has been a straight shooter, never afraid to make people uncomfortable. Take a listen.
I want every white person in this room who would be happy to be treated as this society in general treats our citizens, our black citizens. If you, as a white person, would be happy to receive the same treatment that our black citizens do in this society, please stand. You didn't understand the directions. If you white folks want to be treated the way blacks are in this society, stand. Nobody's standing here. That says very plainly that you know what's happening. You know you don't want it for you. I want to know why you're so willing to accept it or to allow it to happen for others.
So powerful, you guys. Before Jane Elliot joins us, let's talk about that for a moment. I know that we are familiar with Jane Elliot and that experiment. What were your thoughts just listening to her there?
Well, I've seen that piece before, and you often wonder, how do you educate those that have never experienced discrimination, and how do you get them to be empathetic for those that are? And again, we talk about the voiceless and the powerless and those that are suffering from the discrimination and the trauma that comes with it. That's the greatest challenge. I mean, because we are neighbors with those that aren't being discriminated, and you're trying to figure out how to coexist. And I'm curious and I'm anxious to speak with her because she's been doing this fight, I believe, since the day after Martin Luther King was killed.
Yeah, and you know the words. That's right. Jane Elliot, thank you so much for joining us here on The Arena. And for our viewers who aren't as familiar as coaches, talk to us about the Blue Eyes, Brown Eyes experience and what you know from the years of how it's been able to translate and work.
We're doing the same thing today that we did in 1968. In fact, we're doing the same thing today that Hitler did in 1933. And if you're young, you don't realize it. But I'm old, and I was born the same year that Hitler came to power. And I watched what he did, and I'm watching that same thing happen in this country today, and people aren't aware of it. Young people aren't aware of it because they didn't study it. Older people don't want to admit that it's happening. It's ugly. You see, we set ourselves up to fail during the Spanish Inquisition, because the Spanish Inquisition was when they decided that people were either white or black. If they were white, they were all right, and if they were black, they were subject to be killed, because we figured that people who were running on the Spanish Inquisition figured that black people couldn't possibly be Christians, so it was all right to kill them. Now, there were no black people at that time. There were no white people at that time. You look at me, and you can see the color of my hair, and you can see the color of my shirt. Both my shirt and my hair are white. My skin isn't. There are no white people on the face of the earth except in Tanzania, where there is a large group of people who are albinos. You need to realize that those two words were deliberately chosen to set us against one another. White represents good and black represents evil. In every book, in every Western movie, in every poem, you need to realize that they set us up to be at odds with one another. As long as we use the words white and black, we will have blatant racism in this country. I didn't know how bad it was, and I didn't know that I was part of it until the day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. At that time, we were studying the Indian unit. It was spring, and third graders in the spring are kind of restive. They want to get out of the room, so you teach them something exciting, and the Indian unit did that for us. Now, those folks we were talking about weren't Indians. They had lots of names for themselves, but Indian wasn't one of them. We were going to put up the teepee the next morning, and I was taking home the one that we had made the previous year. I was going to wash it, dry it, put it on the living room floor, and iron it. Walked in the door. The telephone was ringing. I answered it. My sister said, "Is your television on?" I said, "No." "Better turn it on." "Why?" "Because they shot him." I said, "Who'd we shoot this time?" Because we were in a shooting mood, and she said, "Martin Luther King Jr." And then my world stopped for about 5 seconds, because Martin Luther King Jr. had been one of our heroes of the month in February, along with, unfortunately, George Washington, who owned slaves, Abraham Lincoln, who was, in fact, our first black president, but we didn't know that at that time, Daniel Boone, who killed Native Americans, and Davy Crockett, who died killing Mexicans as we tried to take over part of their land. I didn't tell them the truth about those heroes. I told them only the wonderful things that those men had done. And then I put my kids to bed. I fed them, put her to bed, laid that teepee out on the floor, turned on the television, and there was Walter Cronkite saying to 3 leaders of the Black community, when our leader was killed, his widow held us together. Who's going to keep your people in line? I was absolutely furious. How dare that man ask that question? Did he really think that JFK was the leader only of white people? I was furious, so I changed the channel. And there was Dan Rather saying to 2 leaders of the Black community, don't you Negroes think you should feel sympathy for us white people, because we can't feel the anger that you kill at this killing that you can. At that point, I turned off the television. I wound up the teepee. I threw it into the floor of the closet. When my husband came home, he put his arms around me and said, they killed him, didn't they? I said, yes, they did. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to do what Hitler did. I'm going to separate my students on the basis of the color of their eyes, and I'm going to allow half of them to live what it's like in this country for a person of color, and the other half are going to do what it's like to live in this country for a white person. He said, you can't do that. You'll lose your job. I said, I don't care if I lose my job. If I lose my job for teaching the truth, I would just as soon not teach in Riceville. He said, you better be careful. I didn't listen. I went into my classroom the next morning. In came my first student, and we started the exercise. Within 5 minutes, I learned that those little blue-eyed and brown-eyed, all white, all Christian children knew exactly how to be racist because they had learned it from the significant adults in their environment, and I was one of them. I watched brown-eyed boys, dyslexic boys, who couldn't read the day before, read words I knew they couldn't read and spell words I knew they couldn't spell, because all of a sudden they had magic eyes. And I watched a brilliant little blue-eyed girl who came into my room reading at the 6th grade level. In 3rd grade, 6th grade level, she had a steel-trap mind. She had never multiplied. I taught her how to multiply the first 15 minutes of math class the first day she was in my class. She never made a mistake in multiplication again until the day she had the wrong color eyes. And on that day, that brilliant, tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, so-called perfect American girl walked with her shoulders hunched as if to ward off an expected blow. She stumbled when she crossed the classroom. She made mistakes in reading. She made mistakes in spelling, and she forgot how to multiply. I was absolutely, absolutely gobsmacked. If you can do this with a blue-eyed, brown-eyed, so-called white child, Christian child, in the space of 15 to 20 minutes, what do you do to Black children when you do this to them for a lifetime? How dare we, and how dare we forget that if it hadn't been for those first modern human beings who evolved at or near the equator between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago, and without the benefit of any modern technology, moved from that area and over thousands of years populated every landmass on the face of the earth. If we would all get our DNA traced back as far as we can trace it back, we would find out that there is a percentage of every person's DNA in this country, on this earth, that came from a country in Africa. We are all members of the same race. It's the human race. All these that you call races are color differences. They are not racial differences. We've got to get over the idea of several different races. All of you 4 people are my 30th to 40th cousins, whether you like it or not. We are all members of the family of man. Get over it. It's time to put a stop to this.
Jane Elliott, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was extremely powerful. I agree with you. There's just one race, and that is the human race. Thanks for joining us on The Arena.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me.
Wow, she was powerful. Zeke, your thoughts? You were clapping.
I'm clapping because, she's an educator, and speaking from, a historical standpoint, when we talk about race, the invention of white people, Theodore Allen, Volume 1, Bacon's Rebellion, this is when white people was invented, 1676. And this systemic racism that we are living under, this is when race was kind of invented, that put white, Black, people of color. This system forces us all to compete and be against each other because it takes us out of our nationality, our nation, our families, and our tribes. And there's a new thing that came in, and it's called race, which is a social construct, and it's a way to govern, it's a way to rule, it's a way to divide, and that's why we call it systemic racism. But this is an invention, and if we're not talking about changing race and eliminating it from the classifications of black, white, brown, people of color, it's like we're boxes of crayons. You know, now there are cultures, yeah, there are different cultures, there are different customs, but when you're talking about black people, white people, brown people, red people, orange people, we're the only society that's really governed and lived this way systemically. And, you know, kudos to Jane
Elliot, yeah.
for just bringing it to light as an educator.
Renee, your
and
thoughts?
And here's the big question. Why don't we educate and teach the truth in our society and to our kids from an education standpoint?
They've sanitized our history. That's the whole point. What were you going to say?
Yeah, like, so the 1619 Project, you know, the New York Times, they want to start telling the history before the history, per se. And she talked about how the people performed when they weren't treated a certain way. So I think about all the stunted growth of all the youth, you know, that have been put in those boxes, and now all of a sudden they were stellar academically, and now they just can't excel, and everyone's wondering, well, what's wrong with this little boy? Nothing's wrong. Maybe it's how you're approaching the little boy. And she did the perfect experiment. You can't, she knew the students beforehand.
Yep.
She did an experiment, and she saw how they reacted
just
afterwards.
The thought of thinking you're inferior.
The thought
produces that.
She knew what they were performing beforehand, and just the thought that they are inferior, it changed their whole behavior. So I think about all the brown kids, how their growth was stunted.
Yeah, you know, one of the things we set out to do this summer with the coaches is really be educated on what we can do to assist our players. And the person that really was absolutely phenomenal for us as coaches was Brian Stevenson of the Equal Justice Initiative. And he constantly talks about reckoning with our past. And we struggle in this country to address the history of oppression for African Americans that were brought over here. Because of that, we struggle to recognize the trauma that has come with the history of oppression and slavery. And, you know, what she talks about is just, there's so many psychological issues that come. There's so many traumatic experiences that people don't take into account. We're still talking about slavery, and people are saying, well, how do you know if you're a descendant of slavery? Yeah. Well, we are descendants of that trauma that has come from slavery. And that's the understanding that I think she's trying to get to and trying to educate all of us on.
Well, I hear all the time people say DNA, and it's been proven, has cellular memory. So that is the trauma you talk about from the beginning. It's interesting what we were able to accomplish in this first segment of the show. We started with the jerseys. We brought in Jane Elliot. We want to pose this question to you all at home. We want to make you a part of our conversation. Should the NBA continue to allow players to have social justice messaging on their jerseys and courts in the future seasons? I say yes. You could say no. We want to hear from you. Coming up after the break, we talk about a true legend in the fight for civil rights, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, her lasting legacy. On the Arena again after the break.
The Arena on TNT is presented by Tractor Supply Company, serving our local communities stronger together.
Welcome back, everyone. So Friday night, we lost a justice seeker. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died of complications from cancer at the age of 87. She was the second woman in history to be appointed to the bench. She became known as a pioneer advocate for women's rights, and as of late, she was pretty much a cultural icon, often referred to as the notorious RBG. The Brooklyn-born lawyer inspired a generation of women in the fight for equal rights. Renee, I start with you first. When she passed away, I know that social media had so much to say about what she offered, and I wanted to get your take as a woman and being a first in so many different ways, what you thought of her.
Well, first, you talk about social media, and it's kind of ironic. her life work speaks for itself.
Right.
But she became notorious when a New York law student went on Tumblr and started to just talk about the work she did. So it's kind of ironic because, you know, Mrs. Elliot talked about it, how different generations, you know, they watched it happen live.
Sure.
But the next generation, we watched it on Tumblr and different things, and we watch now the notorious RBG, as she's now known and loved. And each generation, it has the same effect. You know, it had the same effect it had on me as it did the people before me.
What was that effect?
That effect is somebody fighting. You know, she was fighting for women. You know, not just in the athletic space. She's fighting in the military. You know, she's fighting different fights that should be obvious. You know, now looking back, everyone's wondering, well, how is that even a thing in the first place? It was. You know, and she was fighting for it to make sure that common sense is not so common sometimes in politics. And so she was fighting in life, and she was fighting that common sense fight. So, you know, I look, people like that, the trailblazers, all the roses. If I can give them all of my roses, I want to give them all.
It's interesting. She had said in one of her past interviews that if things didn't go her way, she would have never been able to be where she is in this moment. Meaning all the things that happened that stopped her from being at the top of her level when she was coming out of law school. She would have never been able to be on the bench. Lloyd, what did you think of her?
Truth teller.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's. You know, in this year, in 2020, we're celebrating the lives of many of our heroes. And, you know, just a few months ago, we talked about Congressman John Lewis, and here in Atlanta, obviously, Reverend C.T. Vivian and Reverend Joseph E. Lowry, and what they've done for the civil rights and that whole movement. But here we have notorious RBG, and she was a truth teller. And again, a small woman in stature, but an unbelievable fighter, an unbelievable truth teller. And what she did for gender equality, for the 14th Amendment, for women's rights, it's just, you know, you have to honor that. You want to celebrate that. And I think we have to honor her legacy by continuing to have these conversations and continuing to fight for our voting rights.
Yeah, there's a theme here. Jane Elliott, unapologetic. We got Justice Ginsburg, unapologetic truth teller. Zeke, your thoughts?
To me, she and Justice Marshall, Justice Ginsburg, they are brother and sister in terms of the fight for racial equality, gender equality, voting rights, everything that those two stood for on the Supreme Court was really about equality. And why is equality and why is being equal such a threatening thing to the society that we live in? Shouldn't everyone have the right to choose? Shouldn't everyone have the right to be free under this system and work together collectively? You know, my daughter, you know, my wife, I come from a strong mother who was marching and fighting in the 60s for racial equality, gender equality, equal pay. All these things should be on the table. And why is that so threatening to this country?
Because common sense is not so common, as Renee just pointed out. As we go to break, let's take a look at those who remembered the justice seeker. Bill Clinton pointed her. He says, we've lost one of the most extraordinary justices ever to serve on the Supreme Court. Agreed. Who else do we have there, guys? After Bill Clinton, President Barack Obama. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg fought to the end through her cancer with unwavering faith in our democracy and its ideals. I respect that. And Bill Gates. Justice Ginsburg was a trailblazer who devoted her entire career to fighting for equal justice for women because she knew it would improve life for everyone. Well said. Again, Justice Ginsburg passed away on Friday night. She was 87 years old. She will be forever remembered for fighting for women's rights and leading the way, her lasting legacy. Team, people are watching. This is what the streets are saying, the social media streets. Jane Elliott on the Arena just took us to church. You just said that, didn't you?
I definitely said that.
All right, and Jane Elliott just went real and off. That's us talking. on the arena, TNT Bravo. Meanwhile, we're getting ready. There is LeBron James arriving tonight for Game 2, Western Conference Finals. 7:32 tip, folks. You got to watch it. That's Eastern. Take a look at the gear. More Than a Vote has launched their official online store. Fans can go to morethanavote.org to shop. Now listen, this is the important part. Proceeds go to the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and their fight to secure justice for all. So you can go there and grab it. Meanwhile, don't forget Warner Media has partnered with Rock the Vote. So pull out your phone and scan right there. Just popped up on the top of the screen. Check it out, folks. It is the Rock the Vote Warner Media Election Center to register to vote. Be engaged. Remember, your voice is your vote, and vice versa. Meanwhile, while the NBA moves closer to crowning a new champion, the Hoops bus just finished one of its first cross-country trips, bringing basketball from coast to coast, building and refurbishing courts along the way, while continuing to keep the Black Lives Matter movement in the headlines. The Hoops bus is quite literally a vehicle of change.
We're not ones to fall and stay on the ground. We get up. We're gonna show y'all what one love really means.
We are gonna disturb all the stereotypes that they think about us. We are going to disturb all the people that say, I'm not black, so it's not my problem.
Basketball is something that really allows people to come together no matter what background you are.
Just creates a good forum to open up conversation and create a bond right away.
We're disturbing that here today, we're disturbing that here tomorrow, and we're disturbing that here for the rest of our lives.
The job that I do is I'm a community activist and a basketball architect, and I always try to evolve James Naismith's vision for basketball. The Hoop Bus is something that was cooking on my brain for about 10 years. What if we kind of renovated a school bus and turned it into a basketball traveling machine? Found this beautiful bus collecting dust in the middle of the Palm Desert.
Their mission is to rebuild basketball courts all over the country with a message to end racism.
The entire mission of the Hoop Bus is to bring people together,
uniting them through basketball, art, and fashion.
We felt called to dedicate the bus to the Black Lives Matter movement.
I have faced racial injustice in America. I have been racially profiled. I have been falsely accused and arrested and gone to jail and had to fight for my freedom. So I know what it feels like.
We all have this message that we want to get across, a message of positivity, a message of love.
We are basically the freedom riders of 2020.
The idea for the road trip was sparked by our goal of traveling the country and building communities. The March on Washington, which was publicized after the killing of George Floyd, for us felt like a monumental task that we could build towards.
In each one of these stops, we're going to be spreading a message of love and unity through basketball. We want to do what we've done in LA and spread it across the country.
We want to come show support and solidarity, start connecting and start having conversation, and just realize that really basketball is the common story and it really unites. For this story, I had to install bunk beds, outdoor showers, AC system. We replaced the indoors with hardwood floors. We changed the seating area so people can face each other and it's more conversational. For a project like this to come together, it's all about the people involved.
The diversity amongst us is phenomenal. We have people from every different background.
We've been almost all the way across the country now. Starting off in LA, where the Hoop Buses originated, Venice Beach, California.
Hit Redlands for a small protest. Palm Springs, Phoenix, Arizona, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Dallas, Texas. We went to Houston, Texas.
Went to New Orleans on Bourbon Street.
Batesville. We went to Birmingham, Atlanta, Georgia.
Charlotte, North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, then Washington, D.C.
This is an event that was kind of announced through social media. Even in small towns where there's 100 or 200 people already know about the Hoop Bus. Is incredible. It's already become this vehicle of change.
One of the main things on our trip was improving courts.
One of my favorite moments was in Dallas. We built a court for a community, and it was phenomenal.
These guys really came to our community, our little community where nobody comes. They talked to us, they shook our hands, and they built a whole court for us.
Just to see the excitement and the joy that the kids had.
That makes an impact even after we leave. I mean, we pull up to cities and we play some basketball and we have conversations and then we go to the next city. But I think that we were able to really make a lasting impact in that community in Oak Cliff.
Atlanta has been amazing. It was definitely one of the spots when we were looking across the map, like where do we want to stop? It was Atlanta, 100%. It's a huge, huge culture spot for civil rights.
There's so much history in Atlanta. First stop we pulled up to was a John Lewis mural. And when you stand underneath it and get to look up, I mean, you're just in awe of him and what he represents in civil rights history. Stopping by Martin Luther King Jr.'s birth home and standing on those steps. Besides just the hoop bus being there, I think being there as an individual is really impactful.
This city is the most important to me. Being born Northside Hospital, Atlanta, Georgia, raised in Marietta, Georgia, literally playing recreational ball right up there in that gym, knowing all the black excellence that is in Atlanta and being able to bring the hoop bus here. Myself, I can tell my daughter years from now, your father did something positive beyond basketball, something big that will last forever, that these kids out here will see forever. And they be like, when I get older, I need to do that too.
Everybody put their fists in, and we're in this together. We came a long way together.
The march taking place here in Washington, 57 years to the day after Martin Luther King Jr. gave his I Have a Dream speech.
If you're looking for a savior, get up and find a mirror. We must become the heroes of the history we are making.
To come to Washington, to be able to walk in the shoes behind the trailblazers like Martin Luther King, 57th anniversary for I Have a Dream. It's amazing. The Freedom Riders that were in 1961 really showed that example of standing for something.
Let's finish this together too. It's not over.
The people have the power. When we gather together, we can do anything. Build courts.
We dedicate a court that has a nod to the great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Change communities.
We want to see change happen, and we want to see justice. We won't rest until we do.
There's a knee upon the neck of democracy, and our nation can only live so long without the oxygen of freedom.
I have a dream as well to, help change the world and to make the world a better place.
The strength must be exercised by more than rhetoric and more than marching.
It's a full global civil rights movement.
We're on this journey together, and it's not over. 57 years later, still a lot of work to be done.
As the civil rights movement is moving forward, like the hoop bus is following.
We have only just begun.
Our journey has not ended yet. We will continue amplifying the voices of the unheard.
It's not a moment at all.
Going into the communities and let the world know that these are the people that make America great.
Carry on 3. 1, 2, 3. Carry on.
I support the hoop bus. Now, what do we have here? Getting off the bus, Jamal Murray arriving for warm-ups. Let me ask you this, Coach, how many points you get tonight? Over, under?
Well, he's probably going to need about 30 or 40 to get him going.
Yo.
They need his production.
Yeah, all right, that's what he needs. Welcome back to the arena, everyone. I'm glad you all are listening. Again, the streets are talking. Beautiful tribute to Trailblazer, the great Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the arena. Thank you. Rest in power. Notorious RBG. I support. Meanwhile, guys, this is what we want you to know. Be sure to join us Tuesday, 7, another wonderful episode of The Arena presented by Tractor Supply Company. We'll catch up with some of those players whose teams did not make it to the bubble. Take a listen.
I don't really know how I feel about not being in Orlando. Oh, man.
Hammer time for LeBron James.
I do like the Celtics. I have that relationship with a lot of them guys over there. I definitely watch a lot of their games.
Murray, inside, incredible.
I'm actually glad to see basketball back on TV.
I feel like a lot of players can be themselves when it's just a gym like that.
Yeah. Layside, outside looking in. Coach, I don't know how to transition. I didn't know how to transition because it said that, and then I have to ask you.
Coach, so how you feel about that?
So, how you feel about being on the outside
Y'all want me to throw some chairs around here or what?
So, shucks. Coach, talk to me. You guys are bubble training camp. What is that exactly?
Bubble, we're going to go and we get to practice. We get to play.
Okay.
And we get to create our own locker room drama like the Celtics. Anything we can do to recreate what those guys are getting in Orlando. But no, seriously, for us, it's an opportunity to play basketball.
Yeah.
And everything in 2020 has really been different. And for us that didn't get an opportunity to go to Orlando, and we have a young team, we just need competition. We need team bonding. We need to create some chemistry. And so we get 2 weeks to do it starting tomorrow.
Yeah, you guys getting a head start on things. I feel good about the new season for you.
We'll take advantage of it.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we're still friends.
We still good.
Okay, good.
Yeah,
We'll be back in just a few moments. Oh, no. That is Keith's fault.
That is great.
The Arena on TNT is presented by Tractor Supply Company, serving our local communities stronger together.
Gals and guys, they agree. Should the NBA continue to allow players to have those messages on the jerseys? They say yes, 69%. So from that, we go to our champions. We take a moment tonight to honor a Kent State basketball player named Kaylin Bennett. Kaylin is known as a good player on the court, but off the court, he's inspiring those who are tired of being labeled and considered limited.
I have to ask you a couple of quick questions. First off, talk to me about being a D1 collegiate athlete with autism.
It was a blessing to be able to tell people I had autism. It was crazy how long it took for me to admit, because I was getting D1 offers. I was playing against guys that are in the league or top of their college team since I was young. But when I was like, I need to go ahead and tell somebody, hey, I have autism. This might help somebody. And the feedback is wild. I never knew I inspired that many kids. Just getting here and being here is just a blessing. So I just try to do what I can right now to inspire as many kids as I can, reach out to as many people as I can, use my platform as much as I can to inspire these kids and let them know that you have a future. As much as we get scared of seeing what's on this TV, you have a future. You are special in your own way.
When you think of labels and how people try to put them on others to make them comfortable, how do you address that?
When they label me as nonverbal or autistic or whatever you want to call me, I think whatever label you're given, I think it's up to you to break it. But my mama always says I broke the spectrum because I overcame a challenge somebody said I would never overcome. And that label also does not define you as a person. You define yourself. You are you.
You have been chosen for a reason, and your words are inspiring. And I'm not just saying that. You really are special in more ways than one. Kaylin Bennett, one of Cari's champions, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your message, and inspiring me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
I really like him. He was really, really sweet. He inspired me. Are you familiar with his story, Coach?
I've seen it before, and I think it's I'm glad that you had some time with him. Dominique Wilkins, our Atlanta Hawks great, has introduced me to an organization called Culture City. And Culture City works with, a lot of families and kids that have autism. I have a nephew with Asperger's as well. And so there's a special place in my heart for that story. I really love his quote about him being him. You know, you have to be you and you define who you are. So just seeing what he's been able to accomplish as a basketball player dealing with autism and overcoming the labels is truly remarkable.
We can appreciate that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I have, like Coach Pierce, I have family that are on the spectrum as well, as we like to call it. And the way he said, that's just the opportunity to break out.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
That was so beautiful, and he's so proud. A lot of times people give you a label thinking it's going to hinder you. He took his label and he was wearing it with pride. So, I love all the feel-good stories. So.
Yeah, I would say, the coaches in the NBA a couple of years ago, we all wore the autism pin for Autism Speaks. And, the thing that the kids are inspiring, but when you meet the parents and the work that they have to put in every single day with their kids, I mean, you really just get motivated meeting the moms and dads of the kids, because not only are they inspiring their kids, but unknowingly they're inspiring a whole community of people that just, you know, you wake up and you're like, I don't know if I can do it, but then when you look at that parent who's doing it with their son or their daughter, hey, you know, that's big time.
Yeah,
That's
shout out to
big time.
Kaylin Bennett's mom too. She has built a lot in him and put some self-esteem in him, and I really appreciated her. You guys, Western Conference Finals Game 2. Who you got?
Lakers.
Lakers.
Send it over to inside.